So we're going to continue on Chapter 8. Briefly going through, so we're talking about the relational themes and the necessary reparative experiences. Last class we began with talking about eliciting maneuvers. And all eliciting maneuvers is that our clients have these rigid ways of relating. What are those three typical rigid styles of coping or styles of relating?
Like moving towards, moving away, moving against.
Yes, moving towards, moving away, and moving against. And when our clients act in these characteristic ways, rigidly, moving towards, they pull certain behaviors from other people, right? They are going to draw out relationships that are too close, that are enmeshed, right? Our moving away clients who distance, they're going to distance. What they're going to pull from other individuals is distance, right? They are going to elicit people, they are going to elicit feelings of boredom, feelings of disconnection, feelings of uninterest, feelings of frustration, feelings of aloofness, right? And our clients that have the moving against style, who try to be in control, they are going to elicit individuals to feel controlled. Now, how individuals respond when they feel controlled may differ. Some individuals, when they feel control, respond with counter-control. Some individuals, when they feel controlled, respond with complete submissiveness. But either way, this moving against style is going to continually pull problematic ways of relating. And this will happen to us as therapists with each of these clients. Yes?
We might get into this more, but some question that I have is, as a therapist, I have two questions. As a therapist, do you want to start out by recognizing what they elicit from you and the ways they want you to relate to them, and in a way kind of go along with that and make the relationship feel more secure with them, and then slowly allow them to recognize themselves and to work on changing those relational patterns. Or are there times where from the get-go you want to be are they not need to be more controlling and more directive? I'm gonna from the beginning not do that. Or maybe they want comfort and reassurance in this sort of way right from the get-go. I'm not going to provide that. Or is it that you want to provide that a little bit more than is ideal, but then over time you change that dynamic?
Yes, we will talk more about that. Do we want to join and align with clients' defenses in the beginning, or do we want to assertively call them out from the get-go? We'll talk about that when we talk about interpersonal balance, because what you're talking about is being too close, of going along and complying with what the client wants, or being too far away and being controlling and telling the client what to do. And so as per client response specificity, the intensity of the client's pathology will determine how we respond. Healthier clients will be easier to engage with, and more extreme clients with more extreme and more rigid styles of moving towards, moving away, moving against will be more difficult. The initial thing that we want to do as soon as we experience one of these pulls is to start formulating what? A working hypothesis. So as soon as we start noticing these, the first thing that we're doing is establishing a working hypothesis. And the working hypothesis is founded on what three areas? What are the three domains that we are exploring in developing our working hypothesis?
Is it how they were, it was developed,
Mm-hmm.
and then how they interact with others, and how they interact with the therapist?
Exactly. When we're wondering about our working hypothesis, which is our idea of What's the central thread that goes through this person's life? We're asking, how did these problematic interpersonal styles develop developmentally? How do they occur in the present life of the individual in their everyday interaction with others? And how are they showing up with the therapist? So when we feel a client moving towards, we're experiencing that in the domain of us and the client. And adding in what the client is telling us and sharing with us, we're going to build out that working hypothesis. One key thing, sometimes we may align with clients' defenses a little bit. So if you have a client that's dependent, per client response specificity, if you don't give them some support, maybe a little bit more than you might with other clients, they will drop out of treatment because they'll feel like you're not helping them, because you'll actually be repeating a problematic relational dynamic of this person feels like they need help and you're just moving away, moving away, moving away. That is the dependent individual's experience of the world, right? I need somebody, but somebody's not there for me. That's why I grab onto these relationships. And so for a dependent client, you might align a little bit more. But the key is that we are, even if we're showing up a little bit more, we are not automatically responding to the eliciting pulls. We're not taking the bait. We might provide a little bit more support, but that doesn't mean that we're going to go along, because as long as we do that, and this goes into testing behaviors, we will be confirming the client's maladaptive schemas about the world. So we neither want to just go along with, the idea that we want to just go along with to build a relationship and then change, that's problematic. Because if we just go along with the client's natural ways of acting, we are going to confirm faulty schemas. And what we're going to say to the client, essentially in experience, is, I'm just like everybody else. And I'm going to respond in the same way that everybody else does. So there's a specificity for which we'll respond to each client. But we want to remain in a balance and always learn to bring these things up gently. We want to start making process comments from the get-go. We don't need to be obsessed with this. We don't want to be abrasive. But from the beginning of the relationship, we are showing rather than telling, hey, this experience, this relationship here, it can actually be different. So it's a good question. But we neither want to attack clients' defenses in the first session, nor do we just want to blindly go along with them. We're finding that balanced, even middle ground. And we do this by establishing our working hypothesis and by exploring with the client when things are happening. And so I think the key here would be, as we talked about, I think at the end of class, in the early sessions, perhaps rather than a on-the-table process comment or just going along with it or being aloof, we're trying to engage with the client in a different way. We're trying to change the process, neither reacting nor just completely going along. And so these eliciting maneuvers bring out our countertransference. And there are two different types of countertransference. What are they? We talked about them at the end of last class. Client-induced and therapist-induced countertransference. And what's that? What's the difference?
Client-induced is like, you can think, does everybody respond to the client this way? And then therapist-induced is like, or is it like just me responding to them this way?
And why would a therapist experience therapist-induced countertransference?
From like your own like unsolved business.
Exactly. When we are experiencing these emotional reactions, one of the key aspects of this chapter is that as therapists, we can learn to trust our own feelings towards the client as an indication of what problem is occurring for them. When I sit with a client and I feel bored, I can check in with my working hypothesis and I can ask, has this client told me about experiencing relationships that don't have real connection, that don't have real intimacy, where the client doesn't really feel a sense of connection? Has this client told me that they struggle interpersonally? So if I'm sitting with a client and I'm starting to feel bored and we have some rapport and they've told me about this lack of intimacy they've experienced with other people in their lives, I might say to them, I want to just bring you in on my experience right now, if that's okay. As we're talking here, I just notice myself naturally kind of feeling bored and disinterested. Like it feels like what you're saying isn't actually something that we can really connect on. Can we explore that together? Now, for many of us as therapists who have the character of moving towards in order to achieve security and safety, that's a really hard process comment for us to make. And for a moving against therapist might chomp at the bit to make a comment like that, to kind of say, hey, look at this, you're screwing up. But if we can achieve that interpersonal balance and offer interpersonal feedback to the client to say, I'm feeling kind of bored here. I wonder if that connects to what you've been telling me about how some of the other people in your life might be feeling in these interactions. Then all of a sudden we can put it on the table, we can explore it, and what we can do in the therapeutic relationship is change it. Right? Oh, well, I think it's just so important to tell you about this thing because if you don't understand this, you won't understand the whole picture. It's like, okay, well, you're so invested in helping me to see the whole picture that you're losing me. Oftentimes for our dismissive clients, our moving away clients, or even moving against clients, what we want to help them to see is that it's actually more important that things are right in the relationship than that I'm right about everything. And so there's ways in this balanced manner that we can actually talk honestly about what's happening to us, which draws this out from being outside the room of like, oh yeah, I don't have connections and I'm lacking intimacy in this intellectual way, to, oh my gosh, it's right here and right now, it's happening. Like it's happening right here, we can do something about it. If we have these counter-transferal reactions, if I just say, oh, it's just probably me, I'm probably just not paying attention enough. Or if I just blame the client and say, oh, you do this to everybody, right? I'm out. Like I'm not gonna really be there. So this is that participant observer stance. We wanna have a foot in the river of the emotion, of the experience, and a foot on the shore in our conceptualization. And so our working hypothesis is part of what anchors us to help determine, is this client-induced countertransference or is this therapist-induced countertransference? Is this the way most people feel towards this individual when they start acting this way? Or is this my own personal problem that I need to work through in supervision and my own therapy? And then what happens when it's both? Well, it gets complicated and we double down with going to supervision and going to therapy. Oftentimes it's both. And those can be hard to navigate, but as you become more experienced, this will come more readily. You'll identify your own issues and you'll begin working through them so that your issues actually cease to obstruct you in the way that they are. One of the keys here is that the intensity of these eliciting maneuvers is directly proportional to the anxiety that these individuals feel. So you look at somebody like Trump, for example, right? It's very clear that it's very important for him to be in control. Very, 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 very important, right? One thing we can do is just chalk that up to he's just domineering, or maybe he just knows what the right answer is, or maybe he's just an a-hole, or maybe it's whatever, right? You can just chalk it up to something, or you can say, wow, dude, somewhere behind all that facade, behind all that gold, behind all that money, behind all that power is absolute terror of being out of control. So the degree of defensiveness that our clients show is directly proportional to the degree of anxiety that they experience. Now, they might not be conscious of the anxiety. Indeed, those coping strategies are designed to push the anxiety all the way down. And it's very easy for a controlling person to be like, oh, I'm not scared, you're scared. I'm not the problem, you're the problem, right? That's what gaslighting is. It's saying, I'm not gonna feel any of the shame that I feel. I'm gonna puff myself up. I'm gonna throw the shame on you guys, and I'm gonna say, oh, there's the shame, that's the problem. As a therapist, it's really easy to get drawn into that and kind of put up our fists, or draw into that and just submit. But our task is to have one foot in the shore, one foot on the ground. To say something like, it feels really important for you to be in control right now. We're changing the way that we're interacting. So rather than saying, I don't like it when you control me, or, oh yeah, well you actually need to do this, we are changing the interaction. Almost always, in almost everything, there's a third option. You'll hear clients say, well, either I do this or either I do this. You'll say to your supervisors, either I respond this way or I respond that way. Life is rarely a game of either ors, rarely. Much more commonly it's both and much more commonly there's a third option. And as therapists, that's what we're seeking. Neither to distance ourselves nor to become enmeshed. We're stepping back and saying, what's the third option? That's what mindfulness is about. That's why we just preliminarily went through that mindfulness exercise. But mindfulness says that typically in our lives we're responding in two ways. We're getting drawn in way too close to things and we're becoming obsessed and consumed by them. Or we dislike things so much that we're pushing them away and trying to get away from them. And what mindfulness teaches us is that rather than being drawn in and rather than pushing away, we can step back and see both of those as experiences and then just sit with them. Right? Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of these maneuvers, clients aren't super aware of them. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So how would you handle a client that is aware? Have you ever had someone that's I know I just act this way, but I can't really help it?
Yes.
Yeah. How would you handle that case?
So what you're describing, more or less, is obsessive clients. Individuals who would be kind of on the spectrum of OCD. Oftentimes, I know I do it, but I can't stop. And so intellectual insight is different than emotional insight. And so individuals may know something cognitively, but that doesn't mean that they really know it in experience, right? This is me also going outside of my wheelhouse, but I did take 1 or 2 semesters of Spanish. Actually, I took 4 because I failed one of them. And in Spanish, if I'm remembering correctly, there's saber and conocer. And saber is to know fact knowledge, right? To know math, to know the answer, right? But conocer is to know in experience. And that's such a beautiful distinction. Our language, we don't have that, right? We know something. Oh, I know math. Oh, I know my son. Those are 2 very different types of knowing. And so oftentimes our clients know factually what's happening, but they aren't actually knowledgeable about the experience. They don't actually know what's happening. And typically they know just enough to judge themselves for it. And once they know enough to judge themselves for it, then they just add that back to the stack of self-recriminations and self-chastisements. Because typically for those clients, the internal working model is something like, I have to be in control. And also, simultaneously, nothing I ever do is good enough. It's I have to be in control, and also I'm not in control at all. And so it kind of floats back and forth to that. So it's I'm in control, I know this thing, I'm out of control because I can't do anything about it. And so individuals with that, what we're helping them to do is step back and realize it must feel pretty awful to see this thing playing out in front of you and not be able to do anything about it. But that's also part of the human experience. So acceptance is really what we're helping individuals with in that situation. So we move to client testing behaviors. And all these, again, they're more or less unconscious. Oh, that marker is getting dismissed. And testing behaviors are simply about this. Are you the same or are you different? Are you going to respond in the way that everybody else responds to me, or could you respond in a different way? Eliciting maneuvers are fundamentally about avoidance. Eliciting maneuvers are the things that the clients do to avoid unwanted consequences. Testing maneuvers are about approach. Testing maneuvers are about the things that our clients do to approach whether things could be different or not, to kind of try it out, to try to see if they could resolve the issue. These are both deeply unconscious. And this is why the process comments are so important and so valuable, because when we make a process comment, we are making something that's unconsciously happening between us conscious. And then when it's conscious, we can talk about it. We can do something about it. And so insight in the interpersonal framework is not the end of therapy, right? The psychodynamic tradition for a long time is kind of like, well, you just give people these insights and you help them know. But in the interpersonal framework, insight serves the purpose of changing current interactions directly. So we're not just trying to say, oh, you're reacting to me like your dad. That's actually not usually helpful. And our clients usually don't feel like it's helpful either, because they might feel something like, okay, well, I know I'm doing that, but what am I supposed to do there? Instead, I'm much more concerned with what's happening for you right now when you're interacting with me. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, what are you? I'm scared that you might judge me. Oh, I don't feel judgmental. But how's that fear showing up? I can see that it's affecting you, right? So we're shifting from this, oh, I know that you're not going to judge me. It's like a lot of times I'll say something like, I know there's a part of you that knows I'm safe. I know there's a part of you that trusts me. And usually I say this because clients have told me that at that point. I'm not just assuming that, but it's built on I know that there's a part of you cognitively that knows you could trust me and is frustrated that you don't. I also know there's another part of you that I'm hearing and feeling right now that's really scared of me shutting you down. And so I'm wondering if we can just slow down and be with that part of you and see if we can make this a place where that part of you can voice its concerns and we can negotiate through that. And so the testing behaviors are clients' ways of seeing, will you respond to me in this problematic way, or could this be a different relationship? It's about, is this safety or is it dangerous? Compliant testing behaviors are usually relatively easy to deal with. A client might come in and kind of say things like we talked about last week, oh, I love your office, this is so wonderful, yada, yada. That usually feels pretty good for us. So it's easier to respond, even though if we let it feel too good for us and we stay in that, it'll be problematic because we'll recreate that too much closeness like we were talking about with Peter. But it's usually pretty easy to approach those compliance-dependent testing behaviors. What's much more difficult are power and authority behaviors. And I remember the thing that always comes to my mind one example of this might be a client who says something like, well, you have to respond like that because you're a therapist. That's a test, right? If you go, oh yeah, therapists are supposed to go be nice. That client goes, yep, just like everybody else. Just like everybody else, just like what I thought, right? I was working with a supervisor once, and it was very early in my career, and so I didn't realize the problematic nature of my hopes. But essentially, I was looking, for therapy, and my wife just simultaneously was also looking to find a therapist. And I was like, wow, I'm at this agency. It's really great. All the therapists are really great. I'm working here. Maybe my wife could see one of these other therapists, and I wouldn't need to know, and they wouldn't need to know, and that would be great because I'd love to make sure that I have some confidence that the therapist that they're seeing is good, And I brought that possibility up to my supervisor, and he was more or less I would probably be like, oh, let me think about it. Probably isn't the best idea. There's probably some conflict of interest. There's like too much kind of overlap there in a lot of different ways, which from the outside makes total sense. But for me on the inside, it was just like bada bang, bada boom, everything's fixed. And then at the end of the supervision session, I said something like, well, whether she's allowed to or not, I can just have her sign up like under her maiden name and nobody would even know. And what I was doing there, I didn't know it. I didn't realize it till after. I was testing him. I was saying like I said before, are you going to be someone who I say, oh, no, I don't eat my apples unless they're peeled. You got to peel my apples. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be controlling. I'm going to be here. I'm going to tell you what I need. I'm going to walk all over you like I was able to do in many different relationships in my life. And he said to me, he said, like, John Paul, like, he wasn't judgmental. He wasn't angry. He was upfront. But he said, was that a threat? And it took me aback, and I was like, no. And then after the session, I was like, yeah. Pretty much what it was me saying, hey, can I do this? Also, if you tell me no, I'm just going to figure out another way to do it. That's what I was saying. I didn't know that. But I was testing him. Can I walk over you like everybody else? Or maybe are you somebody who can actually hold boundaries for me? Because that's what I really need. I need somebody who can actually contain me and say when enough is enough. I need to know, am I safe to let myself go because I know that there's actually someone bigger than me who can hold it if I lose control? Or if I let myself go, am I going to burn this whole relationship down and then be left alone again or be left powerless? So for individuals who move against, they push, and it may seem aggressive, it may feel aggressive, it may be aggressive at times. But if we can see conceptually that, okay, that's this individual trying to figure out, can I be safe here or not? And there's a way which I can play into that and be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why would you ask something like that? You're being manipulative. And then I'm saying, well, I can't trust him. Or can I step back and say, oh, this is an individual who didn't blow me up because I was pushing the boundaries, but also who still held them. And after that, I was like, cool, makes sense. That's a crazy idea, bad idea. Probably shouldn't mix all those different dynamics. But also, I think I can trust you. And so we need to be able to respond to the tests that our clients play on us, because that's what actually teaches safety. Boundaries establish safety. If there are no boundaries, there's chaos. And oftentimes that's what many individuals who come into therapy have experienced their whole life, chaos of being able to say and do whatever they want. Some have been different, but it's the developmental landscape for many people. So what we're trying to do is we want to behaviorally disconfirm the client's expectations. So here, how do we pass the tests? Essentially, first of all, don't take the bait. This is where we were talking weeks ago, but one of the real keys to developing as a therapist is learning how to just slow down. You can pause. You don't have to react right away. You neither have to push that thing away nor grab onto it and make sure that it happens. We pass the tests when we behaviorally disconfirm their fears. And this is going to be dependent on, first of all, client response specificity. So what does this client need, right? Who remembers the question that I always bring up in talking about client's response specificity, the kind of phrase, tagline? Exactly. Client's response specificity is, what is the relational experience this person needs in order to change? The relational experience I needed in order to change was somebody who could say, in a firm way, but also in a caring way, JP, that's too far. I don't like it when you do that to me. That's what I needed. And I say, oh, cool, this person can tell me when I'm doing something that's out of line, but they're also not going to beat me over the head with a club. I like that. Right? What does this individual need? What relational experience does this individual need in order to change? Some clients, it might be the exact opposite, right? A moving towards client actually needs the relational experience of, hey, you can disagree with me. I actually want to welcome your disagreements. There are some individuals where canceling a session last minute, I actually hear that and I say, dude, that's awesome. This person's changing. If this is a moving towards client who's obsessed with everybody liking them and doing what they're expected to do and being the perfect person, and they call me up and they're like, hey, I know we had scheduled, I know I'm gonna have the fee, but I wanna cancel because this opportunity opened up and I'm gonna take it. Whatever, friends in town, whatever, they're still gonna have the fee. But interiorly I'm saying, okay, this person is learning. There are times in which I can disappoint people, or there are times in which I can say my needs are important here. Now on the other hand, if there's a client who's continually controlling, continually telling me what to do, continually moving things around, and they say, I'm gonna cancel the appointment because I don't want to go today, that's a different experience. And I would see that actually, okay, he's probably acting out of defensiveness, whereas the other individual with the moving towards style is acting out of strength. And so we need to consider, what does this client need? What's their story? And so how does this behavior make sense, either as a continued problematic behavior or as a new, possibly good behavior in this person's life? And then we want to track from one moment to the next the interaction sequences. How does the client respond to what I say, right? For example, when we were in the role play, right? I made some self-disclosure and I kind of shared some things. And in that moment afterwards, I was thinking like, okay, this isn't connecting. I could see that there was a disconnect. I could feel that there was like, okay, this doesn't mean a whole lot, right? And so I was tracking on a moment-to-moment basis, this is actually not a helpful intervention here. And so, Nick, I know one of the things that you brought up right afterwards was like, actually that stuff seemed pretty good. It seemed like it was pretty helpful, but again, with our clients, it's not I know, I'll tell you. It's you know, you tell me. And when our clients are telling us that an intervention isn't working, our question is, okay, how come? Okay, how does it feel when I offer an ineffective intervention? Oh, okay, how would you have preferred me to respond? And so we are letting our clients guide us. Our clients need, so we have here client response specificity. I'll just do a little one. And then assessing client reactions. The difficulty with client response specificity is that it means that we actually need to stay close and connected to the client's individual experiences. It isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It doesn't work like that. There are manualized treatments that are very prescriptive that will tell you, do this or do that. But we will lose clients. Those manualized approaches will work well for people who those approaches, manualized approaches oftentimes will work well to strengthen individuals' defenses if the manualized approaches employ those defenses. So for example, CBT will likely provide a good bit of help for somebody who intellectualizes often, because it's teaching somebody a more effective way to intellectualize, right? But if someone doesn't think in that way, CBTs might be pretty difficult, right? And even the CBT therapists say these techniques weren't designed to be given in a manualized treatment. Manualized treatments were only created so that we could do research, because we need to know that everybody's doing the same thing. And then once the manualized treatments were used, it was like, oh, here's a great one-size-fits-all approach. The interpersonal approach is much more challenging because we need to stick with this client, and this client, and this client, in this moment, and this moment, and the next. There's also, so we track, we stay with the clients. And then in terms of assessing our client reactions, our clients determine the best way for us to respond. As I was just saying, it's not I know, I'll tell you. It's you know, you'll tell me. And so as we're intervening, our clients, they won't tell us explicitly, wow, that was the best intervention you ever did. You really responded to my internal working model and disconfirmed it, disproving my pathogenic hypothesis, which has allowed me to enter into a more emotionally deep place and share with you in a way that I never was able to because my parents had a problematic coping style, and I developed an insecure attachment. They won't say that ever. And if they do, that's actually probably signifying to you this person's, you actually missed and they're just going more intellectual. But they'll say, I really do feel frustrated with my boss. And I think it's because he's acting like an a-hole. They'll say, actually, JP, I don't like it when sometimes you've brought this thing up and I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. They will act in stronger ways. They will act in more expansive new ways. At the beginning of the class, we talked about defining personality and combining these two definitions of personality. Harry Stack Sullivan's definition of personality is the collection of interpersonal behaviors that individuals develop in order to decrease anxiety with their caregivers. And John Paul II says that personality is the spontaneous expression of love. And so on one side of the personality, we have the ways that personality has developed to keep us safe from problems. And on the other side of personality, we have the possibilities which could exist if we weren't constantly defending ourselves. And so you will know when you have passed a client's test because they will respond in more spontaneous ways. They will respond in ways that are less expected. They will respond in ways that go off the script. They will act stronger. Oftentimes, our clients will let us know when we're failing a test by giving us what's called encoded references. And so Yalom talks about having rabbit ears. And he says, we need to learn that anytime a client is talking about some other problematic relationship outside of the therapeutic relationship, there's a chance that what they're actually referring to is what's happening between me and you. So if I'm working with a client, and then out of the blue, the client just starts talking about like, yeah, my principal, he's really controlling. He tells me what to do. And it feels like I just have to do what he wants. Or he's going to fire me. There's a possibility there that what this client is telling me is, John Paul, I feel like I just have to do what you want me to do. I feel like I have to step in line or else you're going to kick me out. Our clients will tell us vignettes. They will tell us stories. They will tell us things. And you'll develop a feel because there's a difference between when somebody is following a flow of feeling and that develops into a story that's relevant and you can trace it. And there's a difference between kind of out of nowhere, somebody just starts talking about this interaction that they had when they were 8 of, this coach was always disappointed in me. They always were really controlling. And so encoded references happen when clients spontaneously tell us stories and those stories communicate to us some feeling that they're having about the current therapeutic relationship. And so what do? We make a process comment. We might say something like, as you're telling me about this story of you feeling controlled, I'm hearing that theme. You've told me of that theme in other places too. I'm wondering if you ever feel like that happens between me and you. And oftentimes clients will say things like, I don't know what you're talking about. Nope, maybe not. Like, where'd that, whatever. We say like, oh, okay. I just wanted to check. Because it would make sense that that's been your experience other places, that sometimes you might feel like I was controlling. And so we welcome that into process dialogue. We know that clients, one of the ways we can know when we are failing a test is when clients begin talking about others, they become externalizing. Yes?
I was just going to say, how important is it for therapists to take the risk of being wrong with process comments?
Very important, but very, very, very important. You have to risk being wrong. You have to. Otherwise, you'll never say anything at all. Now, at the same time, we want to have interpersonal balance. So we don't want to be just making process comments all the time, nonstop. We do want to invite clients to share what they're thinking about us, because otherwise they won't tell us. But there's a way that we can do that that's kind of egalitarian and well spaced out, and there's a way that we can do that that's actually pretty anxious. One way to do that, we can kind of communicate to the client like, hey, I'd like to give you the opportunity to just give me some feedback on how you're feeling about us. Another way we can communicate that in sharing the same process comments is, tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me I'm doing a good job. Like, I just want to check, are we okay? Are we okay? Are we okay? Right? And so there's an artfulness to making the process comments. But my attitude is lean on the side of making the process comment, because misses and ruptures can be repaired. And if you establish that the client is able to tell me when something doesn't connect. If every single process comment I make, client's like, yeah. Or maybe like, I didn't think of it, but now that maybe you're right. Maybe I'm doing it this way, right? What I'm hearing there is, okay, this client is trying to fit my interpretation into their life. And that usually tells me they're trying to kind of please me. And so when I get a sense for like, maybe you guys saw this with Olga. She said like, yeah, I think maybe that's true. I said something like, well, maybe it's not. Or maybe partially is true. Let me know. What of that connected for you and what part of it didn't, right? So that's a way. When our clients show a kind of hesitation about what we say, a lot of times that can be an indication that we are not passing the test. But I would encourage you to verge on the side of breaking the social rules. You will develop over your years, you'll develop an artfulness to it. Was there another question? Did I see another hand? No. So our clients tell us when we're making effective interventions by shifting into externalizing, talking about other people, by becoming repetitive, by intellectualizing or losing focus, and also by becoming more passive, more compliant, or perhaps even more controlling or more domineering. And so the third way that our clients behave and bring out these reactions in other people is transference reactions. Who can tell me what a transference reaction is?
I think that is like we interact with another people and we have issue. We do the same thing with your therapy.
Exactly. Yes. Transference reactions are overgeneralizations of previous problematic relationships. So I had a problematic relationship with my mom, my dad, my boss, my coworker. And I bring that into the therapy session and I'm like, you're doing that to me, you're doing that to me, you're doing that to me. And so transference reactions are inaccurate perceptions of the therapist based on repetitive, problematic prior relational experiences. They're generalizations that make the world an easier place to navigate. They're internal working models. We want to use transference reactions to conceptualize our clients and also to resolve problems in the therapeutic relationship. We're seeking, with transference reactions, the common kind of dynamic bent and the dynamic approach is to give an interpretation of, oh, you're probably looking at me like your mom. That's because you have issues with your mom. We need to go back to your issues with your mom and we need to solve them. But what that does is it puts the authority and the control in the therapist's hands. It takes the control out of the client. It increases dependency, and it takes us away from the emotion while simultaneously eliminating the possibility that maybe I'm the problem as the therapist. And that's something we always want to consider. When we start beginning to notice a transference reaction in the client, we really first want to question, could the thing that they're bringing up right now be a me problem? My client's saying like, oh, you're really controlling. One thing I could say is like, well, that's because your dad. Your dad controlled you all the time. And now anything you see in me, you just interpret as controlling, right? It's gaslighting, effectively, right? But what's going to be more effective is if I explore like, oh, okay, what have I been doing? Help me understand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to control you. What's felt controlling to you? And so we're using transference reactions partly to build our working hypothesis, but also to actually change the way we're interacting and correct problematic perspectives. Individuals are going to be especially apt to have transference in times that they're stressed, times that they're overwhelmed, or times that they're in pain. It's just not helpful. It's kind of like saying to somebody like, hey, you're overreacting, you need to calm down. I don't know if that's ever worked. Maybe some people actually can benefit from somebody saying, hey, I can see what you're going through, and I think you're up here, and I think we can be down here. Maybe that could be like there's a way that maybe that can be tactfully delivered. But we're trying to, with the client artfully, again, one foot is in the river, it's in the storm, it's in the transference reactions, it's in the emotion, and the other foot is on the shore, it's in our conceptualization. One stance is the participant in the relationship, and one stance is the observer, and we're holding both of those at the same time. And so our clients will also have transference reactions in everyday life, right? I called the pharmacy the other day because my medication was on back order, and I was frustrated because they told me they could fill it. I called back, they told me I filled it, blah, blah. Like it was just this whole rigmarole, and essentially one person told me one thing and another person told me another thing. So then I'm talking to the attendant, and I'm like, okay, I'm not getting anywhere. Can I talk to your supervisor? Can I talk to the pharmacist? And they were very short, they were very blunt, and they didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. And I got off and I was like fuming, I was like pissed. I was so mad. Like, you know, these people, and then I was like, what am I reacting to? I was like, oh, I feel disrespected. I feel unappreciated as a customer. I feel like they're not giving me what I want and what I need. And then I kind of thought, first of all, I was like, dude, I am really becoming upset about this. But then I thought, well, JP, like maybe that's a me problem. Maybe what they told me were the facts. And maybe those facts were displeasing to me. But if I'm going to say, man, they're incompetent, right? You know what the first thing I wanted to do was? Who can tell me what the first thing I wanted to do? What do you do when you're at a business and the business doesn't treat you the way that you like? You write a scathing review. Right, the first thing I want to do, have I ever thought of going on Kroger Pharmacy and filling out a praiseworthy review every time that they filled my medication on time for the past 7 years? Nope. Never in my life have I thought about giving the Kroger Pharmacy review. But then I have one experience where they let me down. I'm like, oh, these people, incompetence, people don't, and then I'm like, okay, JP, this is about you, right? So we have transference reactions on the everyday basis. And if I'm talking to my therapist and I'm telling them like, man, the pharmacy, they just disrespected me. They didn't give me the time of day. Like they didn't listen. They were backordered and they didn't respond very well. My therapist can tune in and listen to like, dude, you sound really frustrated, right? He can validate that emotion, but he can also say like, okay, so JP gets less down and he blames other people for being incompetent. Oh, that kind of sounds like what somebody with a dismissive attachment would do. Puff themselves up to take care of themselves and see the problem as external, outside of themselves. And so he can both join me in the emotion of the frustration, but also add that to the internal working model. And this happens to all of us, right? We all have things that just set us off. We all have things like, I don't know why I got so upset about that. I don't know why I got so mad. I don't know why I was so wound up. It's probably because you're not responding to the situation. You're responding to 8 situations that were really big deal. And this situation just feels enough like it so that you can put the blame all on them like you've wanted to do, for years. And so this helps us when our clients share their experiences with other people in their everyday life to build what their internal working models might be, to build what those pathogenic beliefs, what those coping styles may show up as. And so we want to use transference to conceptualize clients. One of the keys is that we have to actually draw out the countertransference, or the transference reactions. Our clients will not say to us, and happens especially after clients share something very emotional, right? They share a deep sadness or they share a great vulnerability. Our clients will not spontaneously say, you responded really well, but I just don't trust you. They just won't say it. So what we need to do is we need to actually make bids and openings to say, hey, you just shared something so heavy, so difficult with me. How was it for you to tell me about that? And what I'm doing is I'm creating a space to say, okay, you just shared something with me. Now that you're checking in with yourself after sharing something with me, what are you afraid of? What are you nervous about? So we need to draw out transference reactions, not by making them happen, but by consciously making space in the session to hear them. And so we're looking for tactful but direct ways to inquire about clients' feelings and reactions towards the therapist. After in session when we have intense interchanges, we want to debrief with the client, doing just that. Hey, how was it for you to share that with me? Hey, today you brought up your trauma. You've never told me about that before. That's a big deal. I'm so grateful that you're sharing with me, but I'm also wondering, after sharing it with me, how's it feeling? What was it like to tell me about that? And oftentimes our clients will tell us things like, I feel embarrassed. Oh, I feel like probably you're gonna walk out of here being like, this person's crazy. Or, oh, I feel like you're actually gonna walk out of here and think this person doesn't have real trauma. They don't have real problems. Or, oh, I think you're probably judging me as being weak for not being able to handle it more. And when we open up these spaces, our clients take us to the core of their internal working models. What was it like for you to share that? Oh, I feel so embarrassed, I just feel so ashamed, right? What they're telling us is, I live my life believing that if I reveal myself to others, I'll be judged and rejected. That's a core belief, right? That's central to the schemas, right? Oh, I feel like now that I shared that, you won't have any respect for me. Whatever it may be, it may show up a lot of different ways, but when we tactfully make openings for that, we'll be very surprised with what our clients tell us. It's difficult when we're beginning therapists to do this because we don't want to be told that our clients feel like we're judgmental. We don't want to be told that our clients don't trust us. I had a client once. He was telling me that he didn't trust me. And I was early in my career, so I wasn't all that tactful. And I don't know how, but I asked him, like, why? And he said, John Paul, it's not that I don't trust you. He said, it's that I don't trust you. Right? And what he was saying to me was like, hey, everything you've done so far has been pretty good and pretty helpful, but I am still incapable of believing that you're going to be there for me. And that shifted through to me from going to like, oh man, why doesn't this person trust me, to being like, oh my gosh, man, I'm sorry. How lonely. How scary, how isolating. What a feeling of stuckness, what a feeling of fear. And so on page 277 here, he talks about these different ways that we can inquire, some of the questions that we can ask our clients to reveal these reactions. And there's different times and different spaces to say these things, but as you were driving to our session today, how did you feel about coming to see me? When you find yourself thinking about therapy, what kind of thoughts do you have about me and our work together? I'm wondering what you might be thinking is going on for me right now as we talk about this issue. I want to check in and get your thoughts about our work together, how you and I are doing. You know, what you like about our time together, what you don't like, maybe interactions that don't feel so good. Initially, we can feel a little self-conscious making statements like this because we can feel like they're I statements, and there's a way in which they can be. There's a way where we can make somebody else's therapy about me, the therapist. How do you feel about me? How do you feel about me? Like we were talking about, Michael. Like there's a way that can be really ineffective. But there's also a way in which we can welcome clients to say, hey, I actually care about you. Hey, this doesn't happen very much in real life when your boss says, hey, how am I doing? And actually wants to know the ways that they're letting you down. And when we do this, again, it takes us to the core. There's three things that happen here in our last minute. One, it takes us to the core of the issue. Two, it highlights the ways that we might, unbeknownst to ourselves, be recreating problematic relationships, right? And maybe it's not something that we're doing, but as long as the client has those misperceptions of us, we're reenacting the relationship. In the client's perspective, it's the same thing. And then three, and this might be for next time to get into deeper, it actually validates the client's emotional experience. Because when we can help the client recognize, oh, you're feeling like I'm judging you, I'm not judging you. But I'm wondering if you felt judged before. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's the story of my life. What we're saying is those feelings of being judged, they might not fit here for me and you right now. But they actually do fit in that situation, that situation, that situation, that situation. So we're helping the client to discern and recognize that those feelings are real, but there also may be times when they're not relevant to this interaction. So we'll continue our lecture on Tuesday.